Hello, Alberta. How we doing? Okay, we are gathering here today for the future of Alberta. We are gathering for a province in peril. Okay, we got Mark from Alberta Pin. He's going to be throwing out some hats, getting the crowd going. And I would like to introduce our independent superstars. We got MayCee and Madison Holmes emceeing tonight. Let's give it up for MayCee and Madison. Let's go.
I'm too short for this mic. It's coming down. Okay, all righty, everybody. Hi, Alberta. How are you? Lovely. Okay, I just have one question before we begin. Are you guys feeling sovereign today?
It sounds like you guys like that little important thing called freedom. Is that right? What do you want?
Well, to give you what you've all been waiting for, some housekeeping. First things first is the command post, aka HQ. So if you lose a person or an item or your brain, to your left is HQ. You go over here, this is safety zone. That's item 1.
Item 2 is the washrooms are also right next to the command post. You got portable and accessible units.
Okay, and for you smokers, there are designated smoking areas. Where are they? No idea, but they're designated for you. So go there.
Because we want to keep the space respectful and prevent any secondhand smoking. I don't know about you, but I'm good.
And now?
Oh yeah, and in the unlikely event that we have to clear the grounds today, there are 4 muster points that will act as our escape route. The 5th is Independence, but we'll get to that in a minute.
The 4 zones, 1 is again to your left, exit. 1 is to your right, exit. 1 is back there to your left, exit. And then all the way north, back where the merchandise tent is your 4th exit. And you will notice, if you didn't come prepared or satiated, we did. There's food trucks. There's 4 varieties.
Yeah, so you got the Wiener Wagon, Treat Wagon, Cocoa and Dip, and Uncle Dad's.
Though we advise heavily, eat at the food trucks before you buy your merchandise, because you don't want to get new goods and then spill food all over yourself.
Yeah, no, and if you do end up spilling food all over yourself, then I guess you'll just have to buy more merch. So in a minute here, we're going to be introducing this handsome man wearing a rather handsome jersey.
Yes, and if you are curious about the jerseys, we did design them. We do sell them. Just come and ask us, and we will hook a brother up.
Hook a brother up. All right, so this man needs no introduction. He is boots on the ground. We just recently interviewed him in Calgary in person because he doesn't stop. He is the CEO of APP, business owner of Sylvestre Sports, Chair Bonnyville Cold Lake St. Paul Constituency Association. As a proponent of Stay Free Alberta, he took it past the signature threshold required to trigger a referendum for an independence. Now, I don't want to give you just a warm welcome. I want to give you a loud welcome. So on the count of 3, I want you to repeat after me. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, let's go!
Hey everybody, welcome and thank you for coming. The first time I met these 2 young ladies was in southern Alberta. Leonard was doing an event and it was full, and they walked up to me and they said, "Hey, could I give you a hug?" I said, "Are you kidding? You want to hug an old guy?" I said, "Of course you could give me a hug." And so they gave me this jersey today. And it's a hockey jersey, and it's funny, it's the same color as the Bonnyville Pontiac jersey that I wore for 14 years when I played senior hockey. So I want you to understand something about hockey, because this whole thing through Carney with his elbows up nonsense is kind of a hockey thing. So you put your elbows up to protect yourself from the other side. So Ottawa is putting its elbows up to protect themselves from us. And I think that's backwards. I absolutely think that's backwards. And I'm going to tell you something else about hockey. When somebody's intimidating your teammates, you stand up for them. And Ottawa, here we are, all of us standing up for our teammates. Come on, let's go. So I want to start this afternoon by thanking all the volunteers and all the people that do all the work to get us here, and every single one of you that collected a signature for the referendum process, that worked so hard to allow us to get here right now, because without you, none of that happens. This signature collection thing, everybody says, and we'll just address it for a minute, is that what's going to happen with that? Well, we still have a legal petition that should trigger a question on its own. That hasn't gone away. So just understand that all that work that you did is still something that we have in our corner to get a referendum vote. All right. So we're going to have an exciting afternoon today. We've got some great speakers. We've got Leighton Grey, Shawn Buckley, Paul Loewen, and Jeff Rath. And I think it's going to be a great afternoon. And again, I thank you for coming. And before we begin, we're going to start with a prayer, as we do with all of our events. And I'd like to introduce and welcome Pastor Jeff McConnell.
Let's pray. Our Father, great are you, clothed in glory. All things are ever before you, every action, every situation, every motive. May your name be famous and exalted among Alberta and even out into the rest of Canada. We call upon you today with hearts that bleed for Alberta, just as your heart bleeds for us. It's your way alone that is righteous. And so let your word be our standard as it once was in Canada. It says in Scripture that when justice is done, it's a joy to a nation. And this is what we ask in our province, justice for Albertans, for her widows, her veterans, her orphans, her poor, and all who remain under the hands of oppression. Provide for us the wisdom and leadership needed as we seek your justice in this province. We need hearts that are going to be wise as serpents, but yet innocent as doves, and your Spirit alone can empower us to this end through Christ. Therefore, let forgiveness and mercy be a part of our character as Christ modeled for us when he endured the suffering of the cross and the victory of the resurrection for everyone who would trust in him by faith. Through faith in Christ, access and peace with God is granted, and so it is forgiveness of sins and eternal life also. O Lord, bless all who are here by keeping us fixed on the right goals and carefulness of our actions. We want to walk blamelessly, without fault, so that our enemies will have nothing say bad about us. Therefore, bless these speakers here and now, we ask. To you be the kingdom and the glory forever and ever. And in the name of your Son, we pray. Amen.
It is amazing to be with you all today. Y'all make my heart go pound. Oh my gosh. The energy is so good. We have an amazing lineup of speakers for you here today.
The first one being a formidable lawyer who actually exemplifies the model that the prayer was just about. Leighton Grey, we actually met him back in 2023 for the We Unify conference, where we so politely interrupted his thinking flow before he spoke on stage. Luckily, we didn't interrupt him today, so hopefully his Holmes meter's replenished since then.
So I have a question out of curiosity for you guys. How many of you here who are a part of the Indigenous community or know people who are a part of that community know if you are in favor of independence? Show of hands. Woo! Nice.
Well, it looks like the consultation process has already began.
So he is an Alberta criminal trial lawyer and partner at Gray Walk Spencer LLP, practicing since 1993, founding his firm in 2005, a status Indian whose great-grandfather was hereditary chief of the Carry the Kettle Band, deeply involved in the Indian residential school class action from 2004 to 2016, named one of Canada's top 50 lawyers in 2024. He is the host of the Grey Matter podcast and has spoken at various APP meetings in the past. Please welcome Leighton Grey.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a bit surreal to be here as a kid who grew up in Edmonton and drove by these buildings with my father and my parents probably hundreds of times. So to be here and speaking to a group like this in front of these incredible buildings that were gifted to us by our forefathers is truly humbling. And so I'm so excited to be here, and I want to thank all of you for being here. So that was a great introduction, and I'm grateful for it. Some of you might know me as a lawyer, others as a podcaster. Maybe some of you have read my books, or you might know me personally. But to my government, I'm something else. I'm talking about the federal government now. I'm the other. I'm an Indian. I have a card here that says, I'm Indian number 37802704001. Which is to say that I live in apartheid state. That's what Canada is. Because the oldest statute on the books in the federal government is the Indian Act of 1876, which creates another class of human being called the Indian. And it's because we have that definition that we have a whole series of decisions, historical, legal, cultural, economic, and spiritual, that have treated Indigenous peoples as the other, as the alien. And you should understand, if you're here and you're an Indigenous person, that's on their heart. And if you're not Indigenous, you should understand hearts. That's an important thing for us to understand, because if we're going to create the greatest society, a new Alberta that's free and prosperous, that society has to be one that unifies Indigenous peoples and as Albertans, invites them into the community, that ends the otherness. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. So a little bit about me, just so you understand who I am. I'm told and I believe that at least one of my ancestors was at Little Bighorn. And no, he wasn't fighting for custody. His grandson was my great-grandfather. His name was Burl Grey. Very remarkable Indian man, Nakota, part of Treaty Number 4 now. And we're part of the Carry the Kettle Nation at Sint-Louis, Saskatchewan. Anyway, my great-granddad, he's one of the first Indians in Canada to earn a Bachelor of Arts university degree. He was also a World War I hero. In fact, there's a legendary story about him that he was court-martialed because when they were walking back from the front in Belgium, somewhere in France, he and another guy who was from his reserve stopped to help a woman who was having a baby in a ditch. Well, fortunately, he was exonerated, and ultimately he was decorated for that service. That gives you an idea of the quality human being that he was. He was the chief of Carry the Kettle. One of his sons served as chief, and my grandmother was his daughter. She and her sister and two of their brothers spent most of their childhood at Brandon Indian Residential School. If you know anything about IRS, that was one of the ones most notorious for abuses. But that wasn't my grandmother's story, by the way. She was grateful for her time at Indian Residential School. She once told me, she said, Leighton, if I had not gone to Indian Residential School, she said, you would not be a lawyer. I said, Grandma, what? She says, well, listen, if I hadn't gone to the white man's school and learned to read and write, I never would have been able to become a nurse. And your father would have grown up on reserve. And she said, Leighton, illiterate boys on reserve don't have sons who grow up to be lawyers. So let's talk about the situation of the Indian in Canada. This is important. Because, you know, they call us the First Nation. But I find we're first in all the wrong things and we're last in all the good things. Here's a bit of a shopping list. First of all, we're last in life expectancy, last in household income, last in educational outcomes, last in government transparency, including the ones on reserve, first in alcohol and drug abuse, first in prison population, first in homelessness, first in domestic abuse, first in abortion, first in suicide, first in fatherless homes, highest in violent crime, first in youth crime, first in child trafficking, first in gang membership, first in unemployment, and most of all, first in government dependency. Now I ask you, is it any wonder that the situation of the Indian and the Indigenous peoples in this country is so terrible? Of course, it's a rhetorical question, but you know, let's talk about specific cases. Some of you might have heard an NDP MP recently. I won't say her name, but she was complaining to Mr. Carney that he was sending money to Africa or Ukraine or somewhere else, and he wasn't spending enough money helping the cause of missing and Indigenous Indian women. Now, I expect all you good people can agree the situation of missing and murdered Indigenous women in our country is a serious thing and that we should address it. And if we can, we should change it, right? Can we agree on that? But the NDP solution is let's throw more money at the problem. Well, some of you may know this, maybe you don't. But did you know the government of Canada now spends more money trying to solve Indigenous problems than it does on national defense? Okay? And listen, who's been to a First Nations community recently? Okay, so you know that once you get past the casino and the hotel, what do you see? You see poverty. You don't see schools, you don't see hospitals, you don't see youth centers or swimming pools or all the other things that need to be there for a happy functioning community. You see a blight on the face of our country. And by the way, this is true in Alberta too. And my message here today is that in a new, free and independent Alberta, we can do this all better. So talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, Let me explain to you how Mr. Carney's government is addressing this problem. Well, he says to judges in our country who are sentencing Indigenous offenders, and if you are a violent Indigenous offender, I hope that what I say right now offends you. 94% of all violence committed against Indigenous women is committed by Indigenous men. Okay? So we've agreed missing and murdered Indigenous women is a serious problem. Now we know who's doing almost all of that crime. But what is the government of Canada telling our judges to do? They say, when you have a violent Indigenous offender, you have to give him a softer sentence based upon his race and his background circumstances. So what's the result, folks? I'm sure you can do the math. So this is the cycle of abuse. And this is just one example of the cycle of abuse in the dysfunctional relationship between that government in Ottawa and Indigenous peoples in this country. And what I would say to these chiefs who are pleading and going to court and trying to stop Alberta independence, explain to me how this relationship is good for our people. Because I'm just a dumb country lawyer, but it goes way over my head. So here's what we do for missing and murdered Indigenous women. We take the very people who are victimizing them. We not only make it easier and simpler for them to commit these crimes, but we legalize drugs. We turn a blind eye to things like human trafficking. We do nothing to solve any of the problems that are causing Indigenous men to harm Indigenous women. And so what do we have? We have people locked in a cycle of violence and abuse. And all the money goes God knows where. You know, it's not like we don't know better. I mean, the federal government spent money in 1996 on a Royal Commission on Aboriginal peoples. And it talked about the problems of missing and murdered Indigenous women. It talked about the situation of Indigenous peoples in Indian residential schools. But let me finish off with this point so you understand the character of the man who's running our country. Mark Carney's father, Robert Carney, he actually penned a sharp critique of the conclusions of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. He has actually spent a lifetime working within the residential school system in Canada, and so he understood the details of it intimately, perhaps better than anyone who was working in the government during that period. And he pointed out that the schools actually were not jails, despite frequent claims that students there were against their will. In fact, parents, like my great-grandfather, had to sign an application form to enroll their children in a residential school. Robert Carney, he bristled at the lack of context in the report, noting that the schools performed a key social welfare function in caring for sick and dying, abandoned and orphaned children. So there's another side to the story. But in the midst of the 2025 federal election campaign, our Mr. Carney, Mark Carney, was asked about this, and he said, "Hey, do you agree with your father's take on this?" He says, "I love my father, but I don't share those views." So this is the quality of the human being we have running our country right now. Okay? Now, I want to finish off on a brighter note. So I'm going to tell you about a very important man from Saskatchewan whose name was Watney. And William Watney, he was an Indigenous man born in 1928 in a single-room log cabin on reserve in Saskatchewan, just like my great-grandfather. And like many kids growing up during the Great Depression, he endured a childhood of poverty and hardship. Education was his release, and he went on to become the first Indigenous lawyer in Western Canada. Isn't that amazing? He also served as the inaugural president of the National Indian Council in 1961. He rose to prominence with his controversial book in 1971 entitled Ruffled Feathers. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. What did his book call for? An end to the Canadian Indian Reserve System. This is 55 years ago, folks. Mr. Watney, who knew what he was talking about, he believed that the Indian Reserve System trapped his people in a never-ending cycle of poverty and despair. He dreamed and fought for a nation where Indigenous people live alongside all other peoples, enjoying the same rights and privileges as everyone else in the country. What an inspiring vision for a new Alberta that is. Sadly, Mr. Watney, he was actually ostracized for his views by his people in his own community. Even his own daughter, who is a professor at a university in Manitoba, has disavowed him. And he died in poverty in 2015. He should be a national hero. So what did William Watney want? He wanted what all Canadians, what all Albertans, non-Native and Native alike, should want, in my opinion. That is to be free from political constraints. He rejected racial segregation. He rejected discrimination and identity politics in all its perverse forms. And yet, in dishonoring his life's work, his own daughter now misrepresents his legacy by distorting the core truths of her father's central beliefs and conviction to truth. I want to close off by sharing with you, I think, a wonderful vision for Alberta independence, which applies to all Albertans, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, regardless of race, creed, color. It's from a man named Roger Scruton, who's a brilliant political philosopher and lawyer from Great Britain. Sadly, we lost him to cancer in 2017, but he left behind just an incredible legacy of books. You'll also find many of his talks and his speeches on YouTube, and I urge you to go and look at them. But he said this, and I want you to take this with you as a vision for a new Alberta. He says, we all have a capacity for love and a deep down knowledge that a life without love is futile. We all have to work to find that love and to create the context in which it can flourish. Likewise with oikophilia, which is a Greek word, it means love of home. And this is where the political difficulties arise. Oikophiles, or Albertans, are in search of a home. And it is to the beauty and heritage of this home that they devote their efforts of conservation. They are not globalists, happy to be anywhere on the planet, but localists who look after the place that is theirs, that is ours. And it's this local focus that leads us to make the first and most necessary step towards sustainability, which is to make out a territory and an identity that is our own, to be protected from predation and embellished and looked after for the benefit of their descendants. If that is not the vision of Alberta independence, if that isn't what Mr. Rath and Mitch Sylvestre and others have been working towards all these years, then I don't know what is. If you have a better vision expressing this than I do, that Mr. Scruton has, then please share it with me, because I think this is precisely what we're trying to do. We love our home. This is not a separatist movement. This is a conservation movement. We want to preserve our home because it's beautiful and it's ours. In closing, I want to thank you all for being here today. It's been my honor and pleasure to speak to you in this way, and God bless all of you, and God bless Alberta.
That shook me. We'll have to have him on the podcast because 20 minutes is not enough to listen to that man. Whew. Our next speaker is Paul J. Loewen, and MayCee and I have not had the pleasure of meeting him personally yet we have had the misfortune of getting familiar with the topic he's covering, which is Bill C-9.
However, it's going to be okay, because if we all get arrested for what we say and they gather us in one tight gathering, kind of like we are today, I don't think it's going to work out well for them at all.
Okay, but in all seriousness, censorship of respectful dialogue under the guise of hateful speech. If we thought it was difficult to get young people our age to speak out now, this bill is going to make it 10 times worse.
Which is why it's so important to have people like Paul speaking out today.
He is an Alberta-based pastor and church leader appointed in 2014. He served in pastoral roles for 20 years in rural and urban congregations. He worked at Columbia Bible College in development and church relations and served over a decade on the Canadian Conference Executive Board. 4 of those years as a moderator. Please, Paul J. Loewen, everybody.
Well, thank you, Mitch, and the team here for the invitation to come and speak as the voice of the church. It means a lot to have this opportunity. And thank you to the many people who have helped awaken Albertans to the seriousness and the hope of this moment. Fellow Albertans, I come as a pastor and church leader who loves the church in Alberta and cares deeply about the future of this province and nation. I want to speak especially today to Christ, and I invite everyone else to listen with goodwill, because questions of faith, conscience, justice, and public life have always been part of Alberta's story. Just over 100 years ago, my grandparents came to Canada from the Soviet Union with my mother, who was still a toddler at the time. They came seeking freedom of speech, freedom of faith, responsible property ownership, and honest government. Years later, my grandmother warned me that Canada would one day face a similar test, and she urged me to pray for God's mercy on this country. I carry those words today not as despair, but as a call to prayer for courage and hope, not out of fear or frustration, but out of love and hope. Many of us feel that something has been taken from us. Scripture teaches us to name evil for what it is. Evil steals. Jesus said the thief comes only to kill, to steal, and destroy. But he came that we might have life, and to the fullest. That is why liberty, justice, conscience, family, property, truth, and are not merely political questions. They are moral and spiritual questions. One example is Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act. It strengthens criminal code provisions related to hate-motivated crime, intimidation, or obstruction at places of worship and other community spaces, and the public display of certain hate symbols. It also raises concerns for many Christians because of how it may affect our religious expression and how it's treated in relationship to the hate propaganda law. Our response should not be panic, withdrawal, or contempt. It should be courage, clarity, humility, and confidence in our Lord. So let me ask two questions that I think Christians in Alberta must face honestly at this time. The first question is, does God care about this nation and this province? The answer, of course, is yes. But the second question is more difficult. What is the role of the church in this moment? God cares because he is Lord over all creation and because public life affects real people. Our families, workers, churches, the vulnerable, and all who wonder whether truth and conscience still have room to breathe. Jesus taught us to pray, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." That prayer, my friends, does not allow the church to be off the hook. That prayer does not let Christians treat public life as someone else's concern. If God's kingdom touches real life, then it touches indeed our worship, but also family, work, justice, truth, freedom, and the way we live together. We engage not out of fear or frustration, but out of love and hope. Let me say this in a way that I think many Albertans will understand. Think about a farm, and if you don't come from the farm, or maybe you're not familiar, maybe your garden, or perhaps a flower pot. A healthy farm has to preserve good soil. And I'm going to give you 3 P words, just like any pastor would do. You got to have a little alliteration here. So the first word is preserve. You got to preserve your soil, your seed, memory, and generational wisdom. Secondly, a farm has to protect against erosion, disease, theft, drought, and hard seasons. And thirdly, it has to produce. It must feed the family, it must pay the bills, it must bless the community, and hopefully leave something healthy for the next generation. A society is no different. Noah Ravoy describes 3 functions that must work together: preserving truth and legitimacy, protecting people and order, and thirdly, producing provision and prosperity. Each one is good. Each one is needed. But each one becomes dangerous when it tries to rule over the others. And here is the church's calling. We help to preserve the soil of truth. We are not called to seize the sword or control the marketplace, but we are called to help society remember what is true, what is just, and what is good. If the soil is poisoned, it does not matter how strong the fences are or how full the bins are. Eventually, the farm fails. In the same way, if truth is poisoned, law becomes control, prosperity loses its moral roots, and power loses its legitimacy. That means, church, you call yourselves followers of Jesus, silence is no longer an option. But neither is contempt. If the church does not disciple our people in public faithfulness, someone else will. So, pastors, elders, parents, teachers, Christian leaders, I want to encourage you to continue open scripture, to teach discernment, to name truth, to expose evil, to defend conscience. Help people distinguish biblical principle from political preference, lawful authority from illegitimate overreach, and confident witness from contentiousness. In the scriptures, Jesus takes a public word, and the word is ecclesia, which in our English we translated as church, and he gives it to his people. It means the ones who are called out. In the ancient world, it was a public life term. People were called out from their homes, given a message or a command, usually by the mayor or some governor, and then sent back into the community to carry it out. In a similar way, the church is called out by the king, instructed by the king, and sent back into our communities to bring blessing, truth, justice, mercy, and the realities of the kingdom of God. And that includes the declaration of the sovereignty of God, the rule of law, and the dignity of each individual. Not with domination, not with contempt, but with courage, humility, and love. For too long, many of us in the church have treated faith as if it belonged inside our sanctuaries, but not in our neighborhoods, our schools, workplaces, courts, legislatures, and public conversations. For that, I believe, repentance is needed, and I include myself in that. So from the heart of a church leader, I want to say plainly, where comfort mattered more than courage, forgive us. Where we stayed quiet while neighbors carried confusion and fear, forgive us. The Lord is calling his people again, not only to speak hope, but to embody it. The ancient prophet Micah in 6 verse 8 gives us a simple word. What does the Lord require of you? And he answers it. He says, to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. That is not anxious activism. It is not passive spirituality. It is public faithfulness. It is the church recovering its call to bless this nation and this province under the lordship of Christ. And here we must be honest. Appeasement is not peace. Compromise that lets us tolerate theft just a little bit longer may feel practical for a season. But if it silences truth, weakens families, or keeps people living under injustice, then it is false peace. Biblical peace is never built on denial or fear or surrender to what destroys. And that is why the church must stand in defense of truth, justice, and rights given by God and not by government. Government may recognize those rights or violate them, but it does not create them. Human dignity, conscience, Well, folks, I guess that was for emphasis. And I would like to add, the beauty of Christianity, the beauty of Jesus is that it allows us to listen to the opposite side as well. And so our prayers are with you, sister. Let me say it again. Government may recognize those rights or violate them, but it does not create them. Human dignity, conscience, family, truth, worship, stewardship, and the right to live responsibly before God come from the Creator. I know a family farm. There's two brothers and parents that decided nearly a decade ago to make some changes to their farm because it was not producing enough for 3 families. And so they began to focus on the soil by introducing regenerative agriculture. Last year, when many farms or most farms around them lost money, they ended in the black. Why? Because they had spent years preserving the integrity of the soil while also protecting the farm and producing productivity. When we focus on the right things, preserving, protecting, and producing, we are far more likely to flourish. So do not let the fear of the unknown rule your thinking. Fear magnifies the risks of change and minimizes the risks of staying the same. We rightly ask, what if things changed? But we must also ask, what if nothing changes? If the present course keeps eroding liberty, property, conscience, parental authority, and public truth, then standing still may not be the safe option we imagined. Let me be explicit. This is not a call to Christian nationalism or partisan loyalty or political domination. It is a call to Christian faithfulness. It is a call to step up and bring life and blessing to everyone. Those who agree with us and those who do not. Those who share our faith and those who do not. Every neighbor bears the image of God, and love of neighbor is never merely private. So, church, rise up. Awaken to Psalm 72, verse 8, which is carved in the halls of our parliament in Ottawa. He shall have dominion also from sea to sea and the river unto the ends of the earth. Awaken not only to what has happened, but to what can happen. Awaken to hope for Alberta and Canada, the hope that brings life and blessing, not out of fear or frustration, but out of love and hope. So what is the role of the church in this moment? It is to preserve truth, protect conscience, produce blessing, and bear witness to our Lord, not out of fear or frustration, but out of love and hope. And here's my call to action. Do not leave this moment as spectators. Choose one concrete act of faithful public witness this week. Pray daily, speak truthfully and graciously, serve your neighbors, get informed, get involved. And if you are part of a church, help open those conversations with courage and care. And we have a tent up there that's called Church and Public Life, or go to our website, churchandpubliclife.ca, for non-partisan materials so that you can have these conversations with people in your church. Some of you were given a business card with a QR code, and I would encourage you just to go directly there at any time and have a look. Let this be more than a rally. Let it become repentance, prayer, courage, and obedience. Let it become a church awakened for the blessing of Alberta and beyond, starting with the neighbor right in front of us. You see, there is also a temptation for all of us to look outward and name everything that is wrong in the world, while avoiding the condition of our own hearts. But the soil that most urgently needs attention may be the soil of our own soul. If you sense something within that needs to be realigned with God's purposes, I encourage you not to ignore that. Name it before God. And if you are able, ask someone you trust to pray with you for help, for healing, and courage. And so I want to conclude by praying the prayer Jesus taught his followers to pray. And I want to invite all who would like to join me to repeat it with me. And for those of you who do not know it or do not wish to pray it, I simply ask that you listen with respect and without distraction for those around you. Let us pray. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Okay, typically at rallies like these, they give you a hyped up speaker, each next speaker, and then elevate the energy. And I feel like each speaker has been heavier and heavier with the message. And I am pleased to say that it is going to get further heavier with our next speaker.
To the dismay of the politicians, we can't ignore the reality of what happened in 2021. So I have a question that has probably been asked to a lot of you if you've been to many town halls. But how many of you or any of your friends that you know have been impacted, harmed, or injured by the experimental gene therapy? Show of hands. Yeah. You are the reason that we can't ignore this subject. And our next speaker is very much aware of how all Canadians are suffering from this. He is a constitutional lawyer specializing in the Food and Drug Act, founder and president of the Natural Health Products Protection Association, founding member and former lead counsel of the National Citizens Inquiry, and has been called as an expert witness before both Senate and House of Commons committees. He is now helping lead the Allison Inquiry with MP Dean Allison. 4 days of testimony from Canadians reporting vaccine injuries scheduled for Parliament Hill September 8th to 11th of 2026. Please welcome Mr. Shawn Buckley.
You're very, oh, well, that's really loud. Can you guys hear that at the back? Because it's rocking up front here. So Mitch asked me to come and speak about the Allison Inquiry. And when I was preparing last night, I was just getting a blank. And then this morning, I was told to speak about blood guilt. And so I'm going to speak about blood guilt. And the Bible teaches us that when innocent blood is shed, that there's basically a guilt that descends upon the people in the land. And so if we were to talk about Canada, when we shed innocent blood, then there's a guilt that falls upon Canadians. If we were to talk about Alberta, then it means that if innocent blood is shed, that there's a guilt that falls upon Albertans. And this is so serious. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, God actually dictates a specific ceremony and prayer. If somebody's murdered outside of a town and they don't know who it is, there's a way to not have that guilt fall. And so they basically are instructed, well, which town is the closest? And then the religious leaders from that town are to take a heifer to basically a valley where there's running water and to break the neck of the heifer and then to wash their hands and then to say a specific prayer. And I just brought it because I don't want to get it wrong. Now, understand, if somebody's murdered, okay, it's so loud. Okay, but so we're just going to blast everyone here. But if somebody's murdered and you know who the murderer is, then you bring justice and then there's no blood guilt. But if you don't know and you do this ceremony, and then so after you've washed your hands, the religious leaders say, our hands did not shed this blood. Now, the important part comes after that. So there's two parts. So our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. Accept this atonement for your people, Israel, whom you have redeemed, Lord, and do not hold your people guilty of the blood of an innocent person. So A, you can't have shed the blood, and B, you can't know who did it. Now, the principle is that you're not guilty for blood that's shed if you don't know. That principle doesn't apply if you know, and that's why I'm supposed to be sharing this with you. So we've got the Allison inquiry coming up. It's September 8th to 11th in Ottawa, on Parliament Hill, in an official committee room, in front of members of Parliament. And we're calling vaccine-injured Canadians to basically share their stories for the first time in front of MPs. Now, Chairperson Dean Allison, he's stood up and said, I'm going to hold this inquiry. But before he made that decision, he was asking Teresa and I the question, and just so everyone knows this, my wife Teresa, and she's the main organizer. He was asking the question, will any other MP be with me in the committee room, or will I be alone? And so he said, go and ask MPs. And so Teresa and I are meeting with MPs. And they're all saying it's not politically viable for me to sit at a table and listen to Canadians tell me the truth about their injury, because we cannot go against vaccines. We're not allowed to disagree. We're not allowed to have a discussion. But here's the important part, is we actually learned that almost every single MP has a belief that's different than ours. And you have to understand that not everyone thinks the same way. I'm guessing this crowd knows about COVID issues. If I said PCR test, you know what I'm talking about. If I say die with COVID, not of COVID, you know what I'm talking about. But there's a whole group of Canadians that don't know a single thing about this, and I need you to listen carefully. So we learned that members of Parliament are very aware of deaths, and they're very aware of injuries, and many of them are injured. But they believe it's long COVID. They believe it's caused by a virus. And no, but listen to what they believe. You're not going to get anywhere unless you understand what they believe. They believe the virus caused the death. They believe the virus caused the harm. And thank God, there's this vaccine that reduced the death and reduced the harm. Now put yourself in their shoes. If you believe that vaccine saved lives, if you believe that vaccine prevented injury, then you are ethically obligated to support it. Do you understand this? You're ethically obligated. if they were to stand before God and say, don't put that blood guilt on me, I didn't see it. They can say that prayer. Now, you and I can't. Do you understand that? They could stand before God because they honestly believed the vaccine saved lives and said, I didn't see it. You know, we announced the Allison inquiry. Well, the freedom community just attacks us. They attack us. And one of the attacks was, well, we want justice. We want the MPs to do something. We want them to hold people accountable. Well, they don't see anything to fix because they have this belief that the vaccine saved lives. To them, the danger is you and I. That would be creating vaccine hesitancy. Okay? No, but you got to understand where we're going, and you've got to understand why we have to tread carefully here. And it's something that we learned. Now, let's talk about what's coming out in the Allison inquiry. And maybe I just want to segue a little bit about judgment first, because I'm going to actually say that a large problem here is us. And many people actually don't understand judgment at all. They think that, you know, we're going to be judged for the bad things we do. You know, you murdered, you cheated on your tax return, stuff like that, right? But the judge, Jesus, in Matthew 25, he actually doesn't mention a single bad thing. He says, and he's the judge, so he's telling us how he's going to do this. I think we can trust him on this. And he says, everyone's going to be, the nations are going to be in front of me. And I'm going to divide them into two groups, sheep and the goats. And he's going to turn to the sheep. And he's going to say, you know, I was sick, like I was dying, and you took care of me. You saved my life. And I was hungry. I was literally starving, and you fed me. And I was naked. I wasn't going to make it through the night on that park bench. It's Edmonton. And you gave me clothes. You gave me a blanket. Like, go to heaven. You've got your reward. And the sheep are going to say, Lord, Lord, we never saw you. We never did this to you. And he's going to say, no, but when you did it to the least of these, both the sheep and the goats, you did it to me. And then he's going to turn to the goats. And he's going to say, you know, I was sick. I was dying and you didn't take care of me. I was hungry, like I'm starving to death and you didn't feed me. I was naked and it was cold and you didn't clothe me. And they're going to say, Lord, Lord, you weren't ever around. We didn't not do this to you. And he's going to say, no, but when you didn't do it to the least of these, you didn't do it to me. Now listen carefully. This nation has been deceived. Do you know, like, I think it's like 85, 86% took the vaccines. This nation has been deceived. But God actually selected a group of people and he revealed the truth to them. He allowed them to see the truth. So the nation's in a stupor, but he says, no, I've got a remnant. I've shown them the truth. Now, when we're at the end of this and we're standing before him and he's talking about Canada and he says, oh yeah, they had this big event, this COVID event, and people are being injected with this treatment. But I actually created a group to stop this. I told them the truth. They understood this was dangerous. And he says, you know, when I was sick, he's asking us, did you take care of me? When I was going to be injected in 2026, I'm 6 months old in Canada, 6 months old on, we start injecting them. I was going to inject. Did you stand up and stop them from the injection? Were you doing anything in 2026 to stop children being injected? Because You're the only ones that can stand up. You're the only ones I told the truth to. You see, we can't say that prayer about blood guilt that the other side can. The other side can say, I didn't see it. But we can't say we didn't see it. So who's the goats? We're the goats. Because we're not doing anything. Because we've been afraid, and it's got to stop now. You know, we're interviewing these people. We've had, I think, over 1,400 applications of people that are desperate to share their stories. And what we're finding is like, I'm interviewing people. They're like waiting for kidneys because they're, you know, we had to reschedule them because they have to do dialysis when they're in town. And the dialysis clinic has scheduled them in, and there's a conflict. There's people in wheelchairs. There's people in chronic, their lives are destroyed. And I ask them the question when I'm interviewing them, what's been the most difficult part? And I'm expecting them to say, well, I'm a quadriplegic. I'm in chronic pain. I'm brain damaged. And most of them, that's not what they say. Nobody listens. I'm gaslighted when I go to the doctors because in Canada, the medical system isn't even allowed to admit there's vaccine injury. The doctors are afraid. No, they're afraid because you and I aren't standing up. The responsibility's here because we allow them to be disciplined. You know, there's one guy coming, Jazz Meat. He's a young guy, like now he's 36. And we weren't sure he'd be able to come because he's paralyzed like from the waist down, including his bowels don't move. So not only is he in a wheelchair, but he's got an IV pool with 2 bags because he has a tube going through his chest into his vein to drip nutrients, and he's got another one going into his stomach to drip nutrients, and those pumps got to run 12 hours a day. And he couldn't find transportation for the IV pool. Well, we've got a video, like, as he's progressing and he's losing the ability to walk, we've got this video of him struggling to walk. And, like, right after that, a neurologist says to him, it's in your mind, you should see a psychologist. And about a week later, he's admitted to the hospital. He's kept in the hospital for 6 months and he leaves in a wheelchair. But this is what these people face. They are treated like modern day lepers. They are treated like modern day lepers. We want to have some Canadian Armed Force people testify because what happened in the forces was awful. And we've interviewed some, and then we came to realize they will be court-martialed if they speak the truth about their vaccine injury. So, yeah, which itself is quite something. In Canada, if you're in the armed forces, you're going to be court-martialed if you speak the truth. So then we're looking for ones that have been discharged, because if they've been discharged for a while, then likely they're not facing a court-martial. And we're having trouble. And the trauma is just tremendous. And so Teresa and I were speaking with a gentleman earlier this week, and he's explaining how the worst part is just how he was treated once he became vaccine injured. And he's trying to explain this concept of camaraderie to me, and I'm not getting it. And he's circling around, he's trying to get me to understand. And I finally got it. Like, he trains with his unit. He gets deployed with his unit. He's dependent on his unit fellow soldiers being willing to give his lives on the mission. He is willing to give his life on the mission. Like, if you want to talk about giving up your life for your brother, like, these guys walk the walk. And so they build this bond of camaraderie that those of us outside the forces can't understand. It's so strong they're willing to die for each other. But if you get vaccine injured, you are excluded from the community. Your commanders, even though they'll tell you they know you're vaccine injured, will do nothing for you. And the medical doctors that will do anything for you but for vaccine injury are ordered not to put that in your chart. And we're tolerating this. We're tolerating this in Canada. And you see, the other side, they don't understand. They don't see it yet. It's almost like there's been a spell. You know, when in Romans, Paul talks about how when Christ was there, Israel was in a stupor. They couldn't see and they couldn't hear. And it's like Canada is in a stupor. But we cannot sit still anymore because we're judged on what we don't do. Do you understand? We're the only ones that can free this. We're the only ones that can bring about the change that we need. And I actually believe that God is moving and that this could break it. You know, we announced on June 4th that we were going ahead with this inquiry. And this inquiry is really just for Christians, including Dean Allison and his wife, who said, yeah, we feel God wants us to do this. So we have no funding. We have no organization. This is like 3.5 months ago. So we're, you know, it's like the NCI all over again. We're just building the airplane as we run it. We still don't have the funds to pay for witnesses to travel. But we announced on June 4th in the National Press Gallery that we're running. And Dean Allison does 2 Facebook posts. Facebook, not X. Just announcing the inquiry. In 24 hours, he has over 1 million views. You know, we have, in the second press conference, we have Michelle Wharton sharing a really tragic story. Well, clips of that, like, go to Juno News, like I think it was 2.6 million. And the people outside who believe that the idea that a vaccine caused injury is foreign, they're not attacking her. They're saying, I don't believe it's vaccine injury. Well, that's the first part of the journey. We're out of the echo chamber. Like, could you imagine if the truth was that the vaccines caused harm, but, you know, it was way less than we thought, and really it was long COVID? Like, if that was the truth and that was being introduced to me, do you know what my first response would be? I don't believe it. That's the first part of the journey, right? So we've got there. You know, we had Dr. Charles Hoff at our last press conference, and it's just exploded out there. And there was a bit of justice here because Dr. Bonnie Henry would annihilate him, and she's, you know, at the official press gallery in Victoria and looking all official. So there was something sweet about having Dr. Charles Hoff in the National Press Gallery in Parliament with all the flags behind him talking about Bonnie Henry. God is good, isn't he? So we had in Alberta, we had a government initiative led by Dr. Gary Davidson, and he came out with a report. And I shouldn't say he, there were a whole team with him. There were some really esteemed medical doctors and researchers, and they came out with a report called the Davidson Report. It was released in January 2025. And I'm just going to read their recommendations on the vaccine, because I think as Albertans, we have a bit of a responsibility. It was, as I understand, the only government inquiry in all of Canada. So from the Davidson inquiry, Chapter 7, their recommendations on the vaccine. Number 1, immediately halt the use of all COVID-19 vaccines without full disclosure to patients regarding both the safety and efficacy issues by their physician. Does anyone disagree with that? 2, end the use of COVID-19 vaccines for healthy children and teenagers, as other jurisdictions have done. See Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and the UK. And then 3, further research to establish the safety and efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines is necessary before widespread use in children and adults. The last one is establish a mechanism for opting out of federal health policy until provincial due process has been satisfied. Now, from a jurisdiction perspective, it's the federal government that approves drugs. That's not a provincial matter. But as Albertans that are awake, we can say we are not supporting the use of these vaccines. We are not supporting public health pushing them. We're not supporting any teenager or child getting them. And we're not supporting any Albertan without full informed consent, because adults can choose to do whatever they want. We're all about freedom of choice. We're all about sovereignty over our own bodies, but we don't have sovereignty unless we actually understand what we're agreeing to. Now, we need you to support the Allison inquiry. And the MP Dean Allison, his last name is Allison, so it's Allison. Go to allisoninquiry.com, subscribe to our newsletter. We're live streaming this. If you are a podcaster or you are an influencer, live stream it, contact us. If you want to come, the alternative media is not allowed into committee rooms, full stop, ever before. But Dean Allison, if you contact us, he can invite you to attend, and you can be there and live stream. So contact us if you're a podcaster or influencer and get people watching, because the reality is we have a responsibility to listen to these stories, and it's going to break you. But we have to listen, and we have to change. And I agree with the last speaker. We now have to take personal responsibility, because we're the only ones that know. Who else can free this nation? Those that know. And it's breaking, and not with anger, but we got afraid during COVID. If you kind of went against the mainstream narrative, you would be mobbed on social media. You would be shamed. Well, there have been several MPs and others that have jumped all over Dean Allison saying, I'm a medical doctor. Where were you when I was saving lives in the emergency ward during COVID and things like that? And normally, there'd just be hundreds of thousands of people jumping in and agreeing and mobbing Dean. But something else happened. He got mobbed, right? And the reality is what's happening is the truth is starting to come out, because you just can't hide the truth. You can delay it, you can obscure, but the truth is coming out. So this is an exciting time. This is actually a time of hope. We're in an information war, we're in a spiritual war, and we were attacked, and the enemy had been planning that attack for a long time, and we've been rolled over. But find me a war where the other side wasn't surprised, where they just got rolled over. Like, my favorite is the Korean War. Like, literally, the American and South Korean soldiers could look over their shoulder, like at the worst moment, and go, yeah, that is the ocean to our backs. And then they held the line, and then they started pushing back. Well, we've held the line. We held the line. And now it's time for us to push back. And forget about the fear. Like, we have to get over the past. It's 2026, and it's now time for the truth. It's now time for us to get rational again. It's now time for us to take things back again, because we understand now. So let's be hopeful, but on these issues, don't be afraid anymore. You can talk. It's just like you can talk about God before COVID. Who's going to be listening about Jesus at a public rally? Who would even dare to say it? Like, during the National Citizens Inquiry, when God started asking me to let him talk at the openings, and all of a sudden, like, Jesus is everywhere, I thought we'd get shut down. And I thought people would react, but that people would log in, just watch the openings, and then log out. Because things have changed. God to take this country back again. He's going to take Alberta back again. We used to have a premier that would do Bible studies in Alberta every week. And the reality is everyone should read. There's a book called Christ or Collapse. And it really shows in a conclusive way that we have our freedoms because of our Christian heritage. And despite what we're told, we are a Christian nation. And we have to get that back, because if we lose that, then we're going to become like the non-Christian nations that didn't enjoy personal freedom, that didn't even have the concept of personal freedom and loving our neighbor. That's what our legal system is based on. The first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And the second commandment, love your neighbor like yourself. Though the freest societies are based on those principles. I'm being told that I'm going to get the fly swatter, so I have to. And thank you so much. God bless.
Okay, so listening to Shawn, he said that we can break the cycle of apathy and we can take back Alberta. And so as this is a rally, I wanted to do what we did the last time I attended my APP rally. And we're going to break the room over here and you're going to say, I am, and this side is going to say Alberta. Ready? I am Alberta! I am Alberta! Yoo! Because we are. All right, so Maddie and I are definitely no Shawn Buckley, but we decided to do our own little version of the National Citizens Inquiry, because we wanted to take young Albertans' testimonies and ask them what they thought about independence. And so before we get into reading some letters, we wanted to call to the stage people of the community that have also written their own letters to be read here today for you. So we call Bruce Scholl, Parker Hukulak, sorry if I said that wrong, and Sarah King. So you can come to this side of the stage. All right, so the first letter that we collected when we were doing our search of testimonies was written by someone who decided to remain anonymous, which is one of the problems that we face as young people trying to advocate for this movement is, as Shawn said, there still is fear and there still is a lot of people that are afraid to speak up. And so I hope that by reading their testimony, they might be encouraged to speak out in person, and that I hope what me and Maddie are doing here allows them to do that as well. And so I'll start. I grew up believing Canada was fair. I never really questioned it. But recently, I started reading about the history of Western Canada, and I realized something strange. Many of us in the West were never actually taught this part of our history. The debates about fairness between East and West did not start recently. They've existed for over 100 years. Some people call it Western alienation, the feeling that decisions shaping the West are often made somewhere else. I'm not saying what the answer is. I just think more people should understand the history. Canada is a democracy, which means population decides elections. Ontario and Quebec together hold the majority of seats in federal parliament. This means that in many elections, the outcomes can be decided before Western voters are fully counted. For people in the West, this can create a quiet feeling. Does our vote actually change anything? It becomes a quiet question that keeps coming back. A question that, without consideration or change, leads to apathy and frustration with the system. The West produces a large share of Canada's natural resources, energy, agriculture, minerals. For generations, Western provinces have debated whether national policies treat these industries fairly. Some historians trace this tension back to the early days of Canada, when economic power was concentrated in central Canada's manufacturing base. Whether people agree or disagree today, the conversation about fairness between regions has been a part of Canadian politics for over a century. Most young people simply never heard about it. When people hear the word separation, they often assume it comes from anger. But when you talk to many Western Canadians, the feeling is often something different. It's a question. Does this country still feel equal for everyone? Maybe the real conversation isn't about leaving. Maybe it's about understanding why some people feel unheard in the first place. Because a country works best when every region feels like it is truly being heard equally. Maybe the real question isn't why people talk about leaving, but why so many people feel unheard in the first place. What does a country owe the people who help build its wealth? If a democracy leaves some regions feeling powerless, is it still working as intended? How long can a country stay united if parts of it feel invisible?
Thank you again to the people that did submit those anonymous testimonies, because we need courage, as the speakers have been alluding to. And on that, I'll do a testimony that is not anonymous, it's mine. As a young adult, age 23, I still find my perception is molded by others, and this topic is definitely no exception. After listening to all the questions and concerns, if ever there is a ballot in front of me to vote Alberta out of Canada, my pencil will be checking yes, and doing as such with confidence. Now, you should ask, confidence in what? Alberta's success? No. I'm not always naive, and on the subject of forming a new nation and fostering our culture, I'm definitely not naive. That's a big ask, but it's an important one. Anything that important is bound to be difficult. But I am a Harry Potter connoisseur, so in the words of Dumbledore, dark times lie ahead of us, and there will be a time when we must choose between what is right and what is easy. I'd be voting yes with the confidence that my future is finally in my own fingers. I want kids. I want a property with real grass and a car that won't break down in 2 years because it's secondhand. My best friends are leaving Alberta and going to Texas because they can't afford rent, insurance, schooling, and appropriate food. They said to me upon our goodbye, "We wish we had what your family does." The only reason I can be as politically involved as I am and entrepreneurial is because I have 7 people, 7 incomes in my household, holding 4 other young adults afloat. I have a rare gift that my friends don't, and they know it, and that mutilates my heart. I understand why the older generations are afraid of starting something new, but what they grew up with is obsolete, and my generation is suffering for it. So one thing I've considered is that if I'm a traitor to Canada for voting for a better future, then the older generation is traitors to their grandkids for voting against theirs. This isn't about Canada. It's not even about Alberta. It's about the next generation. And I'm choosing the youth because relinquishing Canada is nowhere near as treacherous as remaining in it. My testimony is the result of the apathy from all of Canada. The lack of involvement in education in our population has left us all equally derelict. I have to do something to change it, even if it's arduous. So yes, I'm voting yes on Alberta independence. All right.
Okay, so assuming, do we have the community members here that are going to be reading their letters? Hi. So we'll start with Bruce Scholl then.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, I got to put this in here. No, maybe I don't. All right, you guys are on camera here, so wave hello. All right. Thank you so much. Oh, geez, that's loud. Whew. All right. First of all, I want to say, and I'm not going to give her a lot of airtime, but that lady that just got exited a little while ago, isn't it amazing that we have the freedom to say whatever you like? And nobody cared until you got rude. All right. My grandfather cleared his land with horses and neighbors. He farmed a section of dryland wheat for 50 years. He never asked anyone for anything.
The other mic? I don't have the mic. I don't do the sound. You have to go to him. I'm not doing the sound.
I can yell.
Put a cloth over it, maybe.
Hello, hello, hello. Okay. I know, but hello.
I'm just gonna talk to the online people.
Wonderful day here in Edmonton.
Sorry. Hello, beautiful people.
Hello.
How you going?
This is oh, there we are. We're back. Thanks, Max. And thanks to all the speakers that had come before me. You guys are doing a great job. You want to give them a hand? All right, back to my story anyway. He was born to pioneers on the ground that was harsh and wild. The children had no luxuries, but they learned to make do, care for the younger ones, and build a life out of necessity. It was not easy. It wasn't supposed to be. My mother's parents left Scandinavia with 3 children and no English. They carried one belief, that hard work should let their kids prosper. No free rent, no free food, no free health care. Just the chance to work and keep what they earned. Millions of Canadians have a version of that story. Our grandparents left the status quo they would not accept. They came here because the country promised freedom and merit, hard work, contribute, and earn a decent life. To many of us, that Canada is gone. Instead, a country that rewards efforts and leaves people alone, it is a tax collector. More rules, more reach, and less room to breathe. I drew up the plans, the Dominican Republic. I had the numbers, the cost of living, the visa, the flights. What would it take to be gone by spring? Then I thought about what my grandfather did with those odds and no options at all. and I tore it up. Because he did not run, he built. And the ground he built on is under our feet today. Why does this resonate at all? Because many of us have been dismissed, treated as irresponsible or irrational for asking questions, weighing trade-offs, and insisting on the right to think for ourselves. We watch national debates drift towards sweeping agendas while housing, affordability, work, and local autonomy came last. Governments changed. The posture never changed. The West produces, Ottawa decides, and everyone lectures. So people did what communities have always done when they are not heard. They organized. And it worked. On July 24th, Elections Alberta verified the petition. 222,597 valid signatures. You guys. The threshold was 177,000. Thousands of Albertans stood outside in the winter and put those names on paper. Many stepped away from their own families to build a thing they were told could not be built. This is not talk, this is verified. Then on May 13th, the judge quashed the petition on the grounds that the province failed its duty to consult First Nations. The process is stayed. It sits in the Court of Appeal. None of this will be handed over willingly. Any government that benefits from the current arrangement will use law, procedure, and public pressure to protect its interests. Sorry. This is not cynicism. This is simply how power behaves when it is challenged. So let me be straight about October 19th. The question on the ballot is not the question we asked for. It does not ask whether Alberta should leave Canada. It asks whether Alberta should remain a province in Canada, or whether the government should begin the legal process required under the Constitution to hold a binding referendum on separation. That is a door. It is not a destination. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it is what we wanted. It is not. But it is what is in front of us. And there are two tracks running now. The legal track is at the Court of Appeal. The political track is on October 19th. Both matter. Only one of them needs you in a booth. And now, what we are up against, the petition asking Albertans to remain gathered over 400,000 verified signatures. The Premier herself is campaigning for the Remain side. Anyone who tells you this is already won is not being honest with you. 51 days. Our grandparents were not given a country. They were not given a chance and a piece of hard ground. Oh, sir. Hold the line. Do the work. Finish strong. October 19th is achievable if we move with unity and resolve. Thank you.
Parker.
Hello. I wrote a letter. I called it Dear Alberta, I guess. So I'll read my letter. And it starts with, Dear Alberta, your totality exceeds the sum of your parts. You are preceded by your rich history, a story of long, cold hardship and guided by the challenge presented by each experience of your beauty. From the first peoples who have lived upon these lands since time immemorial, carrying knowledge, language, culture, and stories across generations, to the early settlers who arrived with little more than courage and the promise of a life they could build with their own hands. From the ranchers and farmers who wrestled a living from your unforgiving winters, to the roughnecks who followed hope beneath the earth, working in mud, cold, and darkness to fuel a growing nation and world. You have never been still. You transformed hardship into industry, industry into prosperity, and prosperity into stewardship, all while protecting landscapes in places like Banff, Jasper, and Waterton. You built cities, universities, hospitals, energy systems, research centers, and industries that reach far beyond your borders. And today, you stand among the most modern and capable places in the world. Yet, beneath the towers, highways, pipelines, laboratories, and machines remain the same Alberta, immense, demanding, beautiful, and shaped by people willing to meet the horizon and keep going. You are not simply a place we inherited, Alberta. You are a story still being written. But every story reaches a moment, a cliffhanger, a tension, when one must ask what comes next. And this is yours, Alberta. A moment when the horizon is no longer something simply to travel toward, but something instead to choose. The world around you is changing. And with it comes an opportunity that does not often present itself. To look beyond what you have been, beyond what has been expected of you, and decide what you might yet become. You stand at a crossroads. One path is familiar, the comfort of the known, the preservation of the status quo, the continuation of a story already written. However, the other asks something more difficult of you, and that is courage. The courage to imagine differently. The bravery to choose your own way. It is the same spirit that brought people across your prairies, into your mountains, beneath your earth, and through those cold winters that tested the strongest among them. Of anything that can be said about you, Alberta, it truly is that the courage in your spirit has built you. And yet, choosing your own path does not mean turning away from those who have walked beside you, because Alberta, you love your family. You love our Canadian family, and not because our histories have always been simple, nor because our paths have always been aligned, but because they're shared. We've built together, we've celebrated together, endured together, and carried one another through generations of triumph and hardship. Our stories are intertwined, our memories shared, and our past is something neither distance nor disagreement can erase. And Alberta, you honor that history. But love does not require that you remain unchanged. Sometimes loving what you have inherited means having the courage to ask what it could become. And perhaps the tribute we can offer those who came before us is not simply to preserve their world, but to carry forward the courage with which they built it, and to build something worthy of those who will come after us. We believe in an Alberta where every person is free to speak without fear, worship according to conscience, associate freely, and live with the dignity of privacy. Where government is transparent, accountable, limited in scope, and exceptional in execution. Where democracy is direct, functional, and responsive to the people it serves. Where exceptional businesses and public services coexist and are among the best in the world. We believe Alberta has the right to preserve its character, culture, and identity, and to welcome newcomers through immigration that is measured, sensible, and aligned with our capacity to thrive. These are not unreasonable ambitions. They are the foundations of a free society, and we will not ask timidly for them. we will demand them with conviction. And not for ourselves alone, but for those who will inherit this place after us. Alberta, you were defined by the families who refused to accept that the impossible was impossible. So, whatever you do, do not slow down. Choose to be bold. Choose to be proud of what you have built. Choose to be courageous enough to build what comes next. Choose to be thoughtful. Choose to be accountable. Choose to be strong. Choose to be free. Choose with compassion. Choose to be independent. Choose wisely, Alberta.
Oh my gosh. That was gorgeous. Next, we have Sarah King. And I want to say, Parker, you are the hidden gem in Alberta. A lot of young men on the workforce, they're voting in favor of this movement. They're too busy working to say it.
Wow. Hello. I don't even know how to follow that up. Okay, so I wrote this a little while ago and I decided to just submit it and just put my voice out there. This is honestly the first time. This is honestly the first time that I'm speaking in public. And I'm terrified. I'll admit that, I'm terrified. But at the same time, I feel that this is a worthy cause, that I need to step out of my comfort zone for those that haven't found their voice yet. So this is what I wrote. Two things can be true at the same time. I love Canada. I love my fellow Canadians, but I'm also pro-Alberta independence. The pure beauty of the natural scenery of Canada, the pride we all once felt in our country and our shared heritage, the history that brought Canada to life, the good and the bad, the general kindness, generational spirit of hardworking, honest, and humble people. What Canada once was still matters to me. And I'll never forget what it was like growing up in Alberta, Canada. I'm not dismissing or belittling any of that in any way. It's the reason I am who I am today. But just the same as a child grows up at home with their parents, and though they may love them dearly and wish them well, they know it's time they make their way in the world by themselves. And I believe it's way past time for Alberta to try to make it on our own. We have seen example after example of our own voices not being heard or respected in this shared household that we call Canada. And a few kids, Alberta and Saskatchewan, have had to essentially drop out of school to help support the household and its reckless spending, all while the parents, mostly the GTA region and parts of Quebec, tell us how to do our jobs and happily take our money for rent and bills. We're younger, have a great work ethic, and more opportunities than we could shake a stick at if our parents didn't have a say in all we do, and who could come over to play and be friends with us. We could finally be able to afford our own house and keep more of our paychecks. We could start putting together a little nest egg for our next generations and hope they have a brighter and more optimistic future than we could have ever dreamed of. And of course, none of this means we automatically hate our parents. We'll still chat, help out when we can, but it'll be more on equal terms when we're treated as adults too. We still wish the best for the rest of Canada and hope it all turns around. But like a child getting ready to move out has to reassure their parents that they're going to be okay. It's okay, Canada. You can let us go now. We'll be just fine. Thank you. Oh my God. Oh.
That was amazing. I think you did follow up on that one. It's the bravery of these individuals right here willing to voice their opinion that keeps all of this so strong. So thank you so much. And just to confirm, Jeff is, okay, he's available to speak? Jeff is next? Okay. I'm like, Jeff's not sitting here, so I don't know where he is. Okay, good. Okay, so our next speaker, as you're all aware, you know, he's a pretty timid guy. He's kind of quiet, doesn't really voice his opinion that often. So I want to make sure you guys clap really loud to encourage him. We can turn up your mic. It's okay, Jeff. You can speak.
There is no denying he's definitely the most publicized and controversial speaker in the movement. But aside from the differences, he's been here from the beginning, and we know he loves Alberta wholeheartedly.
So let's put our differences aside and focus on what every single one of these people have been talking about, which is building a better future for the next generation. So, Jeff, he's general counsel to the Alberta Prosperity Project and co-founder of it. He holds honors degree in political science and law from the London School of Economics and has practiced in Alberta for over 3 decades, principally in Aboriginal law, treaty and Indigenous rights, and environmental law, with class cases argued in every level of court, including the Supreme Court of Canada. Now, guys, again, don't forget to clap really loud. Please welcome Mr. Jeffrey Rath.
Thank you for that. I gotta say, what a beautiful sunny afternoon in Edmonton, Alberta. I want to say what an honor it is to be here, and I want to thank everybody who shared with me all of their well wishes today. It's all of you and the energy that you bring to this movement is what keeps all of us going. So thank you very much. This is your movement. Thank you for being here today. Now, today I'm here to talk about why it is that so many of us are involved in the Alberta independence movement, and that is for Alberta to get itself outside of the federal Constitution of Canada and develop its own constitution and live in our own way under our own law in the province of Alberta. Now, as some of you may know, I'm actually quite honored to be sharing the podium today with Shawn Buckley and actually my good friend Leighton Grey. Leighton and I actually have the distinction of being the only 2 lawyers in Canada involved in a court case that managed to set aside every stupid COVID order issued by their provincial government during the fake COVID pandemic. And I want to acknowledge Leighton and thank him for his hard work on that case with me. You know, the very fact that we were able to show that every dumb order that Jason Kenney issued, including telling us how many friends we could have, you know, shutting down our high schools while letting our 18-year-old kids continue to go to the casinos and the bars and the strip clubs, every dumb thing that Jason Kenney did that we proved was illegal directly led to that moron being fired as the Premier of Alberta. So Jason, you want to call me names? That one's for you. Now, one of the reasons that I'm so interested in having a new constitution in Alberta really stems from all the work that Leighton and I did during the COVID, during that COVID case we were doing. One of the things that became really apparent, and we were actually communicating with and sharing information with the last signatory to the Canadian Constitution in 1982, Brian Peckford. And one of the things that became quite clear is that Section 1 of the Charter of Rights, the so-called Charter of Rights and Freedoms, was being interpreted in a way by our judges as actually diminishing our rights and enabling the judiciary to actually destroy and take away our rights in the context of all of those COVID cases. That's why not a single COVID case based on a charter right succeeded anywhere in Canada. Because Section 1 contains a provision that says, such laws that are reasonable in a free and democratic society. And our judges would interpret the word reasonable as basically allowing governments to do whatever they want to do to us whenever they want to do it. And what I say, and I'm sure what Leighton and Shawn agree with, is that Alberta needs a constitution where human rights and our rights are absolute, and governments cannot trench on our rights by having judges interpret whether the exercise of our rights is reasonable or not reasonable. Our rights, our human rights, are our rights. They are to be absolute in a free and independent Alberta. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is, in part the Canadian federal constitution, and this is why it is that Albertans need to leave Canada, right? As some of you may be aware, and those of us certainly that have read constitutional law and have read cases and articles on Canadian constitutional law, the Canadian Constitution is virtually unamendable because of the amending formula, right? The only way to amend the Canadian Constitution is for a Canadian province to vote itself the hell out of Canada. Now think about the constitutional arrangement we currently live in, right? The Maritimes have less than 2.5 million people. That's all 4 provinces in the Maritimes. Newfoundland, PEI, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have less than 2.5 million people. They have less than half the population of Alberta, yet they have 37 members of parliament to our 35, right? So every Alberta welfare collecting Maritimer effectively has twice the votes of everybody here, right? So what do you think happens when the subject of equalization is brought up? Or, when discussions in and around inequities within the Canadian federal system are raised in Parliament? We are outvoted 2-1 by welfare collectors in the Maritimes that thrive on the backs of hardworking Albertans collecting welfare from us as they've done for decades. Let's not forget about Quebec. Quebec effectively has its finance department every year go through the exercise of making sure that Quebec stays as a have-not province, right? So the other day, I don't know if any of you caught it, Danielle Smith forgot to thank President Trump for the Iran war and forgot to thank him for the $90 oil we've had this year and eliminating the Alberta deficit because of the fact that we've had high oil prices all year, right? So she's bragging about a $2 billion surplus, which was previously to be a $9 billion deficit. So in effect, we were going to borrow money so that we could give money to Quebec, the Maritimes, Ontario, right? We were going to borrow money to pay for our nurses, our doctors, our teachers, our hospitals, our roads. We were going to borrow money so that we could give money to our ne'er-do-well cousins down east who refused to develop their own gas fields, right? Oh, no, we can't develop natural gas in Quebec. We have 17 trillion cubic feet of it. No, because oil and gas is bad, except when it's developed in Alberta, and we can take all their money, right? Same with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Massive gas fields in those provinces that they have never developed for whatever reason. Well, they continue to collect welfare from Alberta, right? So what I say and what everybody needs to internalize is that Alberta voting itself out of Canada will be doing those regions a favor, right? We'll be teaching them that they need to develop their own natural resources. We'll send engineers from Alberta to Quebec and the Maritimes, and we'll teach them how to develop gas fields. We'll teach them how to develop their own natural gas fields and to get their damned hands out of our collective pockets. The other thing that I want people to focus on when you talk about the inequities of Canadian federalism, and let's not forget, Albertans, we had a referendum. We voted 62% to end equalization, right? What did Jason Kenney do about that? Nothing. What does Danielle Smith do about that? Nothing. You know, she's on Team Canada. She's been groveling and pandering to Carney for the last year. Entered into an MOU with him that saw a 600% increase in the industrial carbon tax being paid in the province of Alberta, cheering, oh, we need to remain in Canada. For what? Right? I've been challenging Danielle Smith for over a year to give us one reason why Albertans will be better off if we were to vote to remain in Canada. She hasn't provided a single reason other than one. The one thing she said was, well, if we remain in Canada, it'll be easier to get a pipeline, right? Wow. How's that working, Danny? Right? And what have we seen this week, right? Mark Carney is in trade negotiations with the United States of America, doing everything he can to kill the Alberta economy with his stupid insults, his ongoing vilification of President Trump, all of the idiotic things that he's been doing in the last year, announcing, the New World Order, a strategic alliance with communist China, entering into, get this, entering into a secret agreement with the Chinese secret police over how the RCMP and the Ministry of State Security are going to cooperate on security, but we can't know about it or what's in the agreement because, oh, that's secret. So I guess now we live in a country where we don't have Chinese secret police stations anymore because we can call them RCMP detachments. Right? This is all what's been happening in the last year while Danielle Smith has been on Team Canada groveling to Mark Carney, right? So just last week, and actually I was talking to CTV before the rally today, and they said, well, what are you going to focus on for the next 51 days to get ready for independence? And what's your big message to sell independence to Albertans? And I said, the best thing for us is the biggest salesperson for independence right now in Canada is Mark Carney, right? This last week, President Trump was talking to Mark Carney and said, yeah, I'm really excited to get the Keystone XL pipeline going. We got that permitted at my side. What does Mark Carney say? Oh, no. I don't know if I can permit that unless you make further concessions at the trade table, right? So that was in the news this week. So what does that tell us, right? That tells us that the captain of Team Canada, the person that Smith has been slavishly groveling to for the last year, right, has basically said that he holds a veto over the Alberta economy. He holds a veto over Alberta oil and gas exports to the United States, and he's not going to permit that, and will continue to exercise his veto over the export of Alberta oil and gas if he doesn't get the kinds of concessions that he wants for Quebec and Ontario while he screws Alberta. Right? This is the country we currently live in. This is Mark Carney, who, God bless him, is the #1 salesman for Alberta independence. You know, this is what we are dealing with on a going forward basis. I mean, let's forget about the fact, and again, you know, we have an Alberta constitution. You know, we're going to have actual checks and balances in this province. We're going to get rid of the Westminster parliamentary system, right? As we all know, the Westminster parliamentary system is effectively designed so that the elites can control the population, well, we have little or no say through our elected representatives, because whether it's in Ottawa or whether it's in this building right behind me, the caucus of the legislature of the governing party are nothing more than a bunch of trained SEALs who, you know, basically sit there doing whatever it is that dear leader tells them. You know, it looks more like, you know, it looks more like the Duma in what used to be the Soviet Union or Russia, or, you know, or some other corrupt system, than it does any form of parliamentary democracy. How many people here think that their individual MLAs or individual members of parliament actually speak for you or represent your interests? Right? None. Not one of them. We are basically, you know, led around by the nose by whatever leader happens to rise to the top, as if we lived in North Korea. And I, for one, am sick and tired of being governed that way. Right? The new Alberta Constitution, and we'll have a constitutional convention where all of us are going to be able to participate and have a say. But the model we are working with, is based largely on the Swiss system of representative referenda and the U.S. system of checks and balances. We'll have a legislature. We'll have a Senate based on the regions of the province, so the cities don't overwhelm everybody in rural Alberta, right? We will not have the Attorney General and Auditor General being subject to the Cabinet or members of the Cabinet. The Attorney General and the Auditor General will be separately elected positions, and their primary task will be making sure that corrupt politicians are put in jail when they need to be. This is why I'm voting and why I'm working so hard for a free and independent Alberta, and why it is on October 19th, I will be voting, unfortunately for option 2. Because, of course, we were lied to by Premier Smith. We were told if we got enough signatures on our petition that our question was going to be on the ballot, right? No, what do we get? We get some phony question to have a question. And then what did we find out this week? We found out this week that Danielle is not going to let us have a vote even if we win. So I said this, when she announced her phony question, that there was no way in hell that Danielle Smith was going to allow us to have a vote, for a free and independent Alberta, even if we won, because she would use the excuse that, we can't have a binding referendum in an election year because it's prohibited by the Citizens Initiative Act. Well, that's a lie. She was told by 2 courts that she has the authority to call our question any time under Section 1 of the Referendum Act. I know that to be true. I was involved in litigating both of those cases. So when Danielle comes up and makes excuses and says, oh, no, we can't do this because of that, she is, again, lying to everybody in this province. Even Keith Wilson, is Keith here today? No, I don't see him. Okay. So even Keith Wilson came out today on X, right, and said that that's bullshit. Of course, Keith wouldn't use that word, but he said, oh, well, there's no reason not to have a referendum in 2027. But, there you go. That's probably as harsh as Keith will ever criticize Danielle. But, that's what we're dealing with, right? Danielle, she's the boss of us. Keep in mind what I was saying about the Westminster parliamentary system, right? She's our dear leader, and she has decided that we children should not be allowed to have a binding vote in 2027, even if we win on October 19th. Right? Think about that, right? As long as Premier Smith is Premier of Alberta, Alberta will never be free. Internalize that. Everybody needs to internalize the fact that they need to join the UCP, they need to buy memberships, and they need to get involved in voting her out of office of the UCP sooner rather than later. Because this is what we're dealing with. We're being lied to. We're told we can't have a vote in 2027. The only silver lining in that, and I want to share this with everybody, and this is why it is important to turn out and vote on October 19th. If Premier Smith is denying us a binding vote in 2027, they know they're going to lose on October 19th. They know that Albertans are fed up. They know we want to send a message to Ottawa. And I guess now she's made it that much easier because vote for option 2 on October 19th, it won't even trigger a referendum because little mummy Danielle says we can't have one because we've been bad kids. I mean, think about that. This is why we need a new constitution in Alberta. This is why we need to be free and independent from this corrupt system that we're currently operating under, and why I, for one, have been standing up and fighting so hard for Alberta independence and to have Alberta become a free and independent country. Thank you all very much. God bless all of you for coming out today. God bless Alberta. Thank you very much.
I'll give you a minute. Go ahead.
Wait.
We have passed 1,000 people watching online, so that's something. We want to thank you all for coming today. We will be handing it back to the CEO, Mitch, in a second. We are very honored, MayCee and I, to have been invited to MC. We've never done this before, so hopefully we didn't let Alberta down. Thank you. Feel free to come say hi. We don't bite all the time. And if you want more of the youth input, our entire channel online is designated to getting youth to come on. If you have youth yourself that would come speak out, please get a hold of us. We are at Home with Holmes. So thank you again. God bless. And Mitch, come take us home.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Now, how about that for a lineup? I wish Jeff didn't mince his words. Honestly. All right. So let's take a second to think about what we heard this afternoon. Leighton Grey talked to us about Indigenous Albertans, about a future that has to include everybody who calls this place home. Paul Loewen stood up there and told us about what Bill C-9 means for the people of faith, for churches, for congregations, for the freedom to say what you believe out loud. Can you imagine here in Alberta? Shawn Buckley talked about Canadians who were injured and then ignored, about an inquiry that I was finally going to let them speak. Now, I wrote this about Jeff before I heard him. So Jeff spoke about a constitution, about Alberta making its own rules. How about that? Alberta's specific rules will allow freedom and prosperity. About time. And then some of your neighbors stood up on these steps and read you their own letters. And you know what? I want to welcome the kids to the movement. How awesome were they? Their words, their own words about their own lives and about their own concerns. And about the fact that I know that we have a lot of kids supporting Alberta independence because they're the ones that are going to hurt. 4 different subjects, 1 conversation. Because every one of them comes back to the same question. Who decides the future of this province? Do the people who live here have a say in it? What I see clearly and what I want back is the Alberta that I grew up in. Limitless opportunity. A place where government would never dare to openly steal from, intimidate, censor, lie, or consciously impoverish or hurt its own people. A place where the goal was to develop and prosper and grow for everybody's benefit. And there's only one way back to that. You have to decide to commit to making change or decide that you will forever accept being under the thumb of Ottawa. It's that simple. This is about winning. Everything we do, everything that I do from now on and from day one is to win. Period. So I'm going to show up until the very end, and I need you to do the same thing. I need you to show up and bring people. We need more people. And let me be clear. I've been saying this for 4 years. No politician is going to save you. You're going to have to do it yourself, with all of us helping. This works because of numbers. It's very simple. Because of ordinary people who decide that they're not going to sit this one out. That's the entire strategy, and that's the only one that has ever worked anywhere. We need to have more votes than them. That's it. We have to stop the cheat, and we have to make it too big to rig. Because they're going to cheat. There's no question. There's way too much at stake. We're watching them do it in live time everywhere else. Now, I need to be straight with you. So here it is. This is crunch time for us. We're getting a vote, and we need to win this vote. Can we win? Of course. We know it. They know it. We've built the largest grassroots movement in the history of Alberta, and that's all of us. We have hundreds of thousands of people in our database, and I am not kidding. So here's what I'm asking you to do, and I want to be very specific about it. We need you to get active, and we need you to get and stay engaged till this is done. Our apathy has got us here. I'm just as guilty as anybody in the room. 3 years ago, I didn't know left from right. The system that we're going to replace is pulling out all the stops, all the disruption, all the games and manipulation it can muster, all of the controlled opposition that they can throw at us. They have money, they have power, media, but what they need to win is more votes than us. So we can control that. We're committed, intelligent, capable, driven people. People who have a vision for a better future. When I was presenting to the Premier with a copy of The Value of Freedom, she asked, not that she was looking for my advice, I'm sure, she asked, when would I call for a referendum vote if I was able to do that? And my response was when I knew I could win. Because again, winning is what this is all about. So in order to win, again, we need more votes than them, and we have to make sure of that. And we can do that by doing the work. We need to know that you're going to vote. We need to know that. We need to know that you did vote. We need to know how many votes there are out there and how many of you are actually going to need help to get to the polls. Our GOTV is going to be absolutely crucial to winning this. And GOTV is get out to vote. Sign up to become an APP member so we know you're there. It's free. Do it here on your cell phone at albertaprosperity.com. Hit the button that says become a member. And send everyone you know who cares about this province to do the same. Now, for example, I'll just make it clear to you. We have let's just use a round number. We have 300,000 members. We ask everybody to get 3. We're at 1.2 million, and that's what it's going to take to win this vote. Being a member allows us to organize and communicate effectively with you, because I'm sure you've noticed that the media doesn't always tell you the truth. So for us, we need to have to be able to talk to you to organize you. It means that we show up in droves on referendum day. Change takes hard work, and we need all of you to push yourselves. No time left for excuses now. We're 60 days away, 55 days away. This week, call the 3 people, not a text. You got to call them. I organized a fundraising dinner in Bonnyville last week, and I sent 3,000 texts, sold 2 tickets. Okay? I got on the phone the next day and called them one-on-one and sold 200. So I just want you to understand, people look at those texts and they go click. When they talk to you, they understand, they know, and most people that you're going to call on the phone are going to trust you. And those are the people that we need to push this over the top. And get them to join us so that we can talk to them too. And donate. I want everybody to understand something. Let's play a silly mathematical game. There's 300,000 of us. If everybody gave us $20, we'd have enough for 4 years. Like, you don't have to give us $10,000, but give us $10 once in a while. And if everybody did that, it's a difference between winning and losing. And when we win, we need the government in power to follow through. Okay? We have to join the government in power. We have to be a force inside the UCP. So that means that you have to join the government in power, and right now that's the UCP. And then you have to participate in that system, because they have absolutely no need to make us independent, even if we win, if we don't push them from the back. So we are not joining the UCP to help the UCP. We are joining the UCP to help ourselves, to help the independence movement. That's the only reason. I hear it all the time. Oh, I'm not joining with those guys because I don't agree with this or with that. It's not about that. It's about joining them so that we can have a voice inside their system. The left has been doing this forever, right? And I want you all, if you can afford it, to buy a ticket to this year's AGM. And if you're not, pleased with what the premier's doing or what the government is doing, you will be able to take them to task on that day in person. How many people here actually are already going to the AGM? Hey, look at that. All right. So here we are at the end of this. It's a two-step process. It's always been a two-step process. And there's no other way to win this. So I've been asked a lot lately if we think we can actually do this. And my answer is, of course we can. Absolutely, of course we can. The only reason we don't win this is if we drop the ball. Especially on this question to ask a question. So will it be easy? Probably not. Will it be worth it? Absolutely. So who would have imagined last year that we would have a vote right now, a year ago today? Would you have imagined that we would get ourselves in the position to actually have a referendum vote, go out there, collect all those signatures, and thank all of you for that, and that we're in a position to vote on our own future? So I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for everything that you've carried to get us here this far. Now let's go build it together. A new future awaits us if we can claim it. And we need to claim it. It's not going to be given to us. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. There you go.
Somebody lost a wedding ring, and I believe it's been turned in. So if you've lost a wedding ring,
Apparently somebody has lost their wedding ring, and it's at the security tent.